Unit 731, Declassified. Unit 731, officially the Epidemic Prevention and Water Purification Department of the Kwantung Army, is probably one of the least spoken of atrocities that happened during the Second World War. This is a secret research unit, posing as a public health agency, which performed some of the most disturbing human experiments in history. These acts, driven by Japan's Imperial Army, had taken place in occupied Manchuria, modern-day northeast China. Despite overwhelming evidence of war crimes, many of those responsible never faced justice, due in part to post-war deals with the United States. As a matter of fact, the government of Japan has mostly kept silent about this period of their history to this very day. The origins and mission of Unit 731 was established in 1936 under the command of General Shiro Ishii, a microbiologist and army officer who became obsessed with biological and chemical warfare. This facility was located in Pingfang, near Harbin, in occupied Manchuria, and was the epicenter of Japan's biological warfare program. Measuring more than 6 square kilometers, this sprawling complex was fully equipped with state-of-the-art laboratories, barracks, and a crematorium where the evidence of its horrific activities was destroyed. The mission of Unit 731 consisted of 2 tasks: to prepare biological armaments for warfare, and to study the impact of diseases and various medical procedures on the human organism. Unfortunately, these pursuits led to horrific human rights violations, inhumane experiments, and atrocities. The experiments conducted by Unit 731 were unimaginably inhumane, using thousands of men, women, and children. The victims were mostly Chinese civilians, although the prisoners of war from Russia, Korea, and even some of the Allied nations became test subjects too. Victims were dehumanized, referred to by their captors as logs, a gruesome metaphor indicating their expendability in the eyes of the experimenters. Vivisection and organ removal. The most horrific practice was vivisection, surgery performed without anesthesia on living persons. Prisoners were actually deliberately infected with deadly diseases such as the plague, cholera, or anthrax. For the progress of these diseases within the body to be studied, victims had to be dissected while still alive, their organs removed. The agony is beyond imagination, a grim testament to the ruthless ways the unit collected scientific data. Testing of biological weapons Unit 731 was also intimately involved in the development of biological weapons. In order to test the effectiveness of such agents, prisoners were purposely exposed to lethal pathogens. Perhaps the most infamous such experiment is that of plague-carrying fleas being dropped from airplanes over Chinese villages to instigate outbreaks that would prove deadly. Other experiments included injecting captives with types of bacteria, viruses, or toxic substances and observing the devastating results. Experiments with frostbite Unit 731 also attempted to study the effects of extreme cold on the human body. In these gruesome experiments, prisoners were taken out in freezing temperatures, their limbs exposed until they froze solid. To study possible treatments, doctors would then attempt to thaw the limbs, using everything from pouring hot water on them to physically beating them to stimulate circulation. These tests left the victims in agonizing pain and usually caused irreversible damage. Sexual violence and forced pregnancies. The agony also reached the female prisoners. Most of them were sexually abused by the guards and researchers. This was in the disguise of studying disease transmission and issues to do with reproduction. In many cases, women were forcibly impregnated by doctors or other prisoners and later subjected to surgery to observe how diseases affected both mother and child. Trauma inflicted in these so-called experiments was extreme, and many did not survive. The aftermath, immunity, and escaping justice. With Japan's defeat in 1945, Unit 731 attempted to destroy evidence of its experiments. Buildings were blown up, documents burned, and remaining prisoners executed to hide traces of the atrocities. Not all was lost, however. After learning the extent of the experiments, the United States entered into a questionable deal with General Shiro Ishii and his team. In exchange for immunity against prosecution for war crimes, Ishii and a number of others turned over their research data to the US, then anxious to expand its knowledge about biological warfare. As a result, most of those who committed these atrocities were never punished. Some even went on to have successful careers in government or industry after the war. This lack of justice has left a stain on history to this day, particularly in countries such as China and Korea, which still feel the deep pain caused by Unit 731, the legacy of silence and denial. This, however, is a vastly hidden chapter in Japanese history, as the government has never come forward with the true extent of the unit's activities. Most Japanese history textbooks also significantly fail to include the events. Ongoing denial continues to drive tensions between Japan and its neighbors, especially China and Korea, which bore much of the horrors. Meanwhile, survivors, historians, and human rights advocates have continued their struggle for acknowledgement and justice. Through documentaries, books, and museums, mostly in China, they try to keep memories alive and the victims remembered. Given the volume of suffering experienced at Unit 731, it is perhaps not surprising that the site has developed a reputation for paranormal activity. Locals and tourists who have visited the ruins of the facility in Pingfang have spoken about hearing strange noises, screams, footsteps, and voices. And some even go as far as to claim they have seen apparitions. While these tales cannot be verified, they further serve to give Unit 731 its grim reputation and give the suggestion that the souls of the countless victims may still linger where they met their tragic demise. Conclusion: a dark chapter in history. The story of Unit 731 constitutes a grim reminder of how cruel man can be and the dangers of unchecked power. These atrocities, committed in the name of scientific research, rank among the worst the world has seen, yet many of those responsible were never punished. This failure to deliver justice, compounded by ongoing silence and denial from Japan, adds to the tragedy of this dark chapter. Remembering Unit 731 is not only a question of paying respects to the victims, but also of realizing how great the evil is that this world is capable of. It should be a grim warning to future generations, never to act similarly, and always face the bitter truth, however it may hurt. Thank you for spending time with us through Spookscope today. Feel free to share your knowledge and wisdom in the comment section. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and share it with your friends and family. Until next time, my dear spooker, stay curious.